Hey everyone, welcome back. It's SamyCaps. I have been playing the Legacy of Phrecia event in Path of Exile, and every stream since then, the conversation from chat inevitably leads to discussing the state of play in Path of Exile and the state of play in Path of Exile 2. So in this video, I'm going to give you my version, the good, the bad, the ugly of both games, and then how I believe Grinding Gear Games is going to take both games into the future. Now, personally, I'm a proponent and believe that Grinding Gear Games is going to continue to support and elevate both games. But as you'll see in this video, as we dissect each game, and I'll share with you the feedback I'm getting from my community and those that come in and out of my streams. Not everyone feels like that. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into the synopsis. All right, so Path of Exile. It's a game that's been in existence for over 10 plus years. And this recent event, the Phrecia event, I have to say, I'm having a blast. Now, I have been away from Path of Exile for several months. Actually since December, since the launch of Path of Exile 2. So it's been a while since I've grinded Path of Exile, and I have to say it was nice going back, a little bit of home, if you want to call it, and definitely some of the things that are blatantly obvious when I first went back is, and again, the preface is always the comparison to Path of Exile 2, right? I just feel that in Path of Exile 1, I'm currently in maps, we're grinding maps. So we're in the end game. So I've done the campaign and we're grinding the end game, and I'm experiencing the new idol system. And overall, and this is going to be no surprise, Path of Exile 1, if there's one word to describe it, and actually you can't describe it in one word, but the one word is like control. You just feel like you're more in control in a lot of aspects in Path of Exile, and I'll elaborate a little bit more. Whether it's progression, whether it's the power lift, the power grind, you're in control. You feel like you're in control. It's definitely a much quicker game from a playstyle perspective to Path of Exile 2. Because of its quickness, because of the fact that you can control your character and your progression, I think, a lot more efficiently. That lends itself to moments where you can just zoom out. And I know as a streamer, Path of Exile 1 is definitely easier on me as a streamer. I could definitely take my eyes off the screen and pay attention to chat and communicate with chat, because it's just a quicker play style and screens and enemies are blowing up. You can shut your brain off, is what it, way more so than you can in Path of Exile 2. The one thing that's also really nice in Path of Exile 1 is the fact when you need something, there are strategies, content in the game that allow you to farm it or craft it. And I love that about Path of Exile 1. If you need something, there's an avenue, there's a road to go down to get it. You are not relying on RNG. Well, there's a hint of RNG, of course, when you're farming and stuff, also when you're crafting, but you are in more control in Path of Exile 1, if that makes any sense. Now, when it comes to crafting, it was so nice to get back into Path of Exile 1 and get away from this casino gambling, less deterministic style in that exists in Path of Exile 2, and more deterministic to a degree in Path of Exile 1. It was a breath of fresh air. That to me is the big difference, is just how the crafting in Path of Exile 1 is more leaning towards the deterministic and not the RNG gambling side like Path of Exile 2. So if you need something, there are ways for you to get it. If you're low on whatever resistance cap, there are ways for you to get the resistance cap on what you're missing, whether it is through crafting, whether it's through going to the bench, the crafting bench. There's just so many outlets for you to fine tune your character and set it up efficiently to go and farm. You're more in control. That's why I use the word control. There are many words to describe Path of Exile, but control. You're in more control of your character, if that makes any sense. After having played Path of Exile 2 for, I don't know, 600 plus hours and going back to Path of Exile 1, hands down, Path of Exile is the more polished game right now than Path of Exile 2. Clearly, it's so obvious. It's a much more polished game, but you're comparing a game that's been polished for over 10 years and a game that's only been out for 2-3 months, right? So is it a fair assessment? You can be the judge of that, but it is what it is. We're comparing the two games right now. So that's Path of Exile 1. Path of Exile 1 is more polished, and it's definitely the better ARPG right now. Path of Exile 2. Now, a lot of people have left playing Path of Exile 2. We're all waiting for the 0.20 patch, which is going to be coming in 3 to 4 weeks. I'm predicting that patch is going to get actually released and dropped on the March 28th or 29th, whatever. Okay, the 28th, March 28th. Who knows? Maybe they'll do it on the 21st and we'll get a nice little surprise. And I think it's going to be a big drop. When we are comparing Path of Exile 2 to Path of Exile 1, what are the differences, the similarities, the good, the bad, the ugly? Absolutely, Path of Exile 2, right off the top, is more new player friendly. What restricted Path of Exile 1 from growing, it's the opposite for Path of Exile 2. Just the way the game is played, the mechanics, the content that is in Path of Exile 2, the way the players introduced into the game is absolutely 200% more new player friendly. Path of Exile 2 is going to be played by more people because of that. And I think it's strategically done that way on purpose, because we know Grinding Gear Games said Path of Exile 1 has a limit. It's reached its ultimate potential. There's no more room to grow the player base, etc. So they purposely designed Path of Exile 2 to make it more new player friendly, and the numbers show it. Other good things in Path of Exile 2 that I wish existed in Path of Exile 1, I definitely 200% miss WASD. I wish they would bring that into Path of Exile 1. That is an amazing thing in Path of Exile 2. Dodge roll is also, I wish that was in Path of Exile 1. It's amazing. I love the dodge roll. I'm not a big fan of the movement penalty once you get out of the dodge roll. I've died many times that way. Surprise, surprise. But dodge roll, amazing. I wish they would put that in Path of Exile 1. The campaign in Path of Exile 2 is phenomenal. Like S tier. Just the progression, the different enemies that you face, the different environments that you're in, and the boss fights. It's just, that leads me to my next thing, which is the boss fights. The boss fights are second to none. Path of Exile 2's boss fights are S tier. It's unbelievable how just amazing they are. So the campaign, just all the things that I said, plus the boss fights that you fight in the campaign, just make it for like unbelievable experience. The camp, and we only have half of it, so it's going to be very interesting to see how things come out with Acts 4, 5, and 6. Now, the bad in Path of Exile 2. The bad, and I guess this is how, depends how you take it, but because it's a more, and dare I say, slower pace, the combat is more methodical. You definitely have to pay attention. So there's no zooming out in Path of Exile 2. You have to pay attention when you're playing Path of Exile 2, whether it's in the campaign or whether it's in the end game. You definitely, your eyes have to be glued to the screen because you can die at any second. So that could be a bad thing for most people. It might be a good thing for other people. Maybe some people like staying focused. So if you're one of those people, this is not a negative, but it's not a negative. I'm just saying you really can't take your eyes off the screen. So it's a more focused game. There's no zooming out like in Path of Exile 1. The RNG as a whole in Path of Exile 2 is just too much on the RNG side. Way skewed over. Way too much. I don't like it. And that leads into the crafting. It's bad in Path of Exile 2 because of that. And I'm not saying, and I've always had this position, sorry. I'm not saying that crafting, for example, has to be the 100% deterministic, but it's so RNG. It's like going to a casino or playing a lottery ticket right now. They need to bring it back to the middle. And I would even argue it needs to be a little bit more on the deterministic side, just a fair shade. We need control somehow, like we have in Path of Exile 1 in our crafting. And that just trickles into other things into the game. It makes us being able to have a little bit more control in the outcome, in our progression, in our power grind, customizing our character, being able to make different builds and different play styles. This all lends itself to those things as well. So right now, Path of Exile 2's crafting is a lottery system, and it's horrible, super horrible, and it needs to be more closer to the middle or over on the deterministic side. So that's the bad. And obviously the elephant in the room with Path of Exile 2, the bad, is the end game. It's horrible, and it's just repetitive in nature. It's boring in nature. I love the system that they have in the end game. I just think it needs to be fine-tuned. Now, how they do that, I have no idea, but they got to do something. You know, some people in my community are saying that this idle system is a testing ground in Path of Exile 1. For it to be looked at whether or not they want to bring it into Path of Exile 2, but only time will tell. It would fit. Whether or not it would work, who knows? But the end game, I'm not telling you guys anything new. The end game is horrible in Path of Exile 2. So, and lastly, regarding Path of Exile 2, I believe this is the worst state we're going to see Path of Exile 2. I only believe it's going to get better and better and better. We are only 2 months into early access. We have a major patch coming in the 3rd month of early access. So they still have time. I still believe they're going to get the game released in the end of this year. But only time will tell. But overall, absolutely, after having played Path of Exile, now the Legacy of Phrecia event, right after grinding POE 2 for so long, it's clear Path of Exile 1 is still the best ARPG in the genre, and it's a much more polished game, like I've for all the reasons I stated before this. So Path of Exile 2 has a long way to go. Okay, so my final thoughts, I want to broach on the topic of something that, since I started streaming Legacy of Phrecia, every stream, inevitably, like I said in the beginning of this video, the conversation in chat goes towards the POE 1 versus POE 2, sorry. That conversation, it surfaces in chat, and depending on which camp you're at, you're defending that camp. So if you're a diehard Path of Exile 1 player, the comments that I see in chat are, why are they wasting their time and resources on Path of Exile 2? The game sucks. Path of Exile 1 is the better polished game. They should, if they focus all their resources on it, they can make Path of Exile 1 better. That is where they should be focusing, not on POE 2. If you're part of the POE 2 camp, what surfaces in my chat, in my community, is Path of Exile 1 sucks, Path of Exile 2 is better, more people are playing it, yada, 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 all this kind of stuff. So, and that starts the discussion. I'm being kind here. It starts the discussion back and forth, and I'm in the middle, and I'm watching all this, and everyone has good positions. Here's where I stand, and I may be a dreamer, I may be completely out of touch, but this is where I stand, and I've said this many times. Path of Exile 1 right now is the best game of the two by a landslide, not even in discussion. Now, I personally prefer Path of Exile 2, even in the ugly state that it's in. Or, sorry, I have my money on Path of Exile 2, if that makes any sense, because I know, I believe Grinding Gear Games is going to right the ship here. And if they do, Path of Exile 2 is going to supersede Path of Exile 1 by a landslide. There's just more in that game. The potential in that game is so massive, for some of the reasons that I outlined in the previous take. So I believe Grinding Gear Games is going to support both games, and they're going to do so in the following manner. I have always stated that Grinding Gear Games has created all these new assets for Path of Exile 2, all these different enemy types, all these different zones, environments, bosses. All this stuff is sitting with them. It's in Path of Exile 2. How I envision it, if I was Grinding Gear Games, I would slowly trickle down those assets to Path of Exile 1 and update Path of Exile 1, still keeping what makes Path of Exile 1, but elevating it. The graphics, the enemies, maybe sprinkling in some more bosses in there. Obviously content, obviously that, right? But I think Grinding Gear Games has showed with all the different leagues in Path of Exile 1 in over 10 plus years that they're capable of introducing fresh new content. So I say they continue to use that methodology with the content and the assets they've made in PoE 2 and give it to PoE 1. Graphically, they got to improve the game. And then content-wise, like I said, they can just add stuff to it. Now, regarding Path of Exile 2, clearly they have some big decisions to make. And I hope they do the following with Path of Exile 2. Number one, please, Grinding Gear Games, do not tone it down or make it that it's similar to Path of Exile 1. Of course, the two games will always have some similarities. Of course, I understand that. But the feel, the play, the style has to be glaringly different. They have to be. They can't be. Path of Exile 2 can't be just a shinier version of Path of Exile 1. It has to be different. And I think they're going to achieve that. But only time will tell. So Path of Exile 2, in order for it to grow, it can't be like Path of Exile 1. It has to be different. Because if they want to contain the massive player base that they've inherited, and I suspect and argue that they're going to even get bigger once they go full release, because a lot of people didn't want to buy into early access. So I think it's even going to get bigger. The 1 million on early access is going to be bigger out of early access, in my humble opinion. So they need to make it still new player friendly. In order for Path of Exile 2 to grow, they need to get the lottery system out of so many mechanics in Path of Exile 2. Right off the top, gambling. Crafting has to be more deterministic. Not 100%, but right now it's 90%, 95% gambling. And that's not fun to nobody. The no fun stuff in Path of Exile 2, the on-death effects, the one-shots, the off-screen kills, that stuff has to be taken out of the game. Has to. They got to fix trials. I can go on and on and on. The only thing that's good in Path of Exile 2 is the style of the game, aesthetically, the bosses, and the campaign. Everything else, I love the new gem system. I love that they removed the socket system. Love, 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 love that. But they need to take away the no fun stuff. I've always said this in my previous videos. So, but to me, they can support both games, and I see them supporting both games. I don't support this theory, and I don't know what it is, if it's elitism or protectionism, but from Path of Exile 1, the OG community, they just are, and I don't blame them. They were not treated right, okay? The fact that they removed all the resources and, you know, they still don't have a new league, you know, I can understand why they're bitter, but you guys are all going to be shaking your heads in 6-7 months when both of these games are thriving, when Path of Exile 1 gets into its normal cadence of its leagues, and Path of Exile 2 gets out of this worst state that it's in, and it starts to get better and better and better. And by the end of the year, leagues are going to be being pumped out in Path of Exile 1 every 3 months or so, and Path of Exile 2 is humming along. They fixed the end game, they fixed the game. Then everybody's going to be like, wow, we have 2 amazing games to play. That is the mountain I stand on, and I firmly believe Grinding Gear Games is going to get us there. And I'm going to continue to say that until they prove us otherwise. And of course, like I stated earlier in other videos, they definitely are taking a hit. Their reputation took a hit, you know, and the fact that Chris Wilson, I didn't bring this up earlier, Chris is no longer with Grinding Gear Games. So everybody's putting this together, and it's all negative, negative, negative from some people, not everybody, don't get me wrong. But this is and I don't blame them. I don't blame the negativity, but you have to look at what is in front of us. They have consistently elevated Path of Exile 1 for 10 plus years. Why would you have any other opinion that they won't be able to do that in Path of Exile 2? Path of Exile 1 was never always in an amazing state. They've had falls, and they got back up and they improved the game. Why? Number one, they're a good studio. And number two, they listen to the players. Now, they at least doesn't mean they do everything that they hear from the player base, but they listen on the core things, the big things. When the community is pissed off about something, 9 out of 10 times, Grinding Gear Games, in their own way, will fix it, staying true to how they see the game. So I don't know why that would ever change. And again, until they start showing us that that's not how they're operating anymore, I'm going to continue to believe that that's the way they're going to take these 2 games. Anyway, let me know what you think. Are you playing the Legacy of Phrecia event, or are you just continuing to play POE 2? How are you liking the idle system? I want to hear it all. Get in the comments section. And as always, if you can like, comment, and subscribe to my content, I would really appreciate the support. Doesn't cost you anything, but it would mean the world to me. Thank you for watching, and we'll hope to see you next time. Take care. The opinions expressed in this video are mine and solely mine. Healthy debate is always encouraged. Hate is never welcomed. So get over it.